Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business with me, Jason Dukes. We have another awesome episode for you. This week, John Sears from the Radial Tire Racing Association, RTRA. He's the owner and also the lead tech. They do some awesome things all around the country with a bunch of different organizations. I had an opportunity of working with him with the World Series of Pro Mod. We'll get to business and talk a lot about that also. A lot of the different pieces that go into an event like World Series of Pro Mod and the Pro Superstar Shootout also. Some quick things here before we get started. Remember that we're brought to you always every week by Drag Illustrated. Support the magazine, all the digital media and the emails and everything that Drag Illustrated has going on. Also Racers Club. Remember, go get your awesome Racers Club stuff at racers.club. Captain's Chair Coaching. Sorry, things are always on different sides, but it's over here. Captain's Chair Coaching, that's my business. Executive coaching to racing professionals. So support that. One last thing, I'll just say these words. You guys do whatever you want to do with it because we need to stay healthy. Get a physical, mammogram, colonoscopy, endoscopy, blood pressure test, diabetes test, PSA, sleep test. Got to make sure that you stay alive. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and get to business with this week's guest, Mr. John Sears. John, how you doing, sir?
Doing really well. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Good to see you. Good to see you again. Last time
you as well
was in Bradenton.
It was. That was another amazing event put on by the Drag Illustrated team, and I'm just so fortunate to have been a part of that. In the capacity as a competition director and somebody that worked closely with a great group of people on putting a rules package together that once again proved that event can put up some stellar numbers and parity for an entire group of pro mods.
Yeah. So this show is going to air on Monday night, and we're recording it, just so everyone knows, we're recording it on a Thursday just because of some scheduling stuff. So just tell us about your current location. Looks like you're in a car doing tech at an event right this moment.
Yeah, exactly. As always, it's getting closer to the weekend. So as those weekends come up, generally I am at the racetrack performing tech services for multiple organizations. This weekend, we happen to be at Rockingham for their Civil Wars event. And part of that event is a Radial Outlaws Racing Series event within an event called Battle of Thrones. And this is something that Donald Long and the Radial Outlaw series are presenting to the public. It's pretty unique as the Civil War classes will be competing during the daytime hours. Currently, they're testing in all classes. And then at nighttime, the Radial Outlaw series for Battle of Thrones will get their opportunity to have qualifiers at night under the lights here at Rockingham for the first time in a long time that Radial Tires have been here.
Gotcha. So tell us about your 2020. I have to look down and see what year it is. Wow, this is crazy. I'm getting so old. But tell us about your 2024. Like, what's everything going on in the world of John Sears this year?
Well, it's been a unique season already, and we're only to April at this point. We started out at Bradenton Motorsports Park as U.S. Street Nationals with a large group of techs. Initially, when you start a year out, you want to try to get your annual or extended tech processes taken care of to minimize the amount of time that people have to spend in tech. So there's some formality that goes along with that. So we had extra techs involved there. Really great group of people. All of these folks that work with us in RTRA are just a genuine, good quality people with a lot of integrity. And a lot of knowledge. I have Vinny Ludicina, who is currently sitting in the PDRA Tech Director position. Rick Dodge, who is now working with NHRA. Jim Bailey, who works with NMCA, NMRA. Jennifer Briggs, who is one of our newest bronze techs. Of course, myself. I have another tech, Eddie Maloney, and another gentleman named Mike Washington working on a new contract that we just signed at the beginning of April. I'm not going to disclose the entity that we're working for just yet because I don't want to jinx it and I don't want to open up a can of worms with a couple of things. So we're sort of treading lightly, but there'll be an opportunity to make an announcement to who we signed that contract with. But it is a 22 event schedule that we signed for. So pretty labor intensive, considering we already had probably 40 plus on the schedule as it was.
Yeah, and so we'll at some point here we'll start at the beginning and go through, but I really want to hear the story of like how you became like how you became the man and like the go-to guy for this, because I mean I know it may be hard to hear, right, but it's one of those things where I'm Wes's coach, and anytime he's building something, it's like, look, just put the best people in place, and you're one of if not the best person in that position. And so we definitely want to hear how you got to there, and so we'll do that a little bit later. But anything else you want to tell us about like 2024 and just the what's happening now before we start and get into the life of John Sears?
Yeah, so I stepped down from my position with PDRA. There were some things I wanted to do in my own personal business and whatnot to promote my brand and to move forward. So we had a mutual agreement, and again, no harm, no foul. They're doing their thing, and they hired a really good guy in Vinny to get the job done over there. And I really appreciate the opportunity that I had with them, because it opened some doors with Wes and some other organizations that gave me opportunities to not only promote my brand, but also gain experience and work with some really good people. Because as you know, you have to be open to doing things maybe outside of your comfort zone. And some people bring some things to the table that you may have not thought about, a new perspective or a new way of doing things. So as these opportunities present themselves, I try not to shy away from them. And I try to absorb what these people have to offer. And that's going to make us better in the future as a tech group and also as a business. Because as you know, the motorsports industry, drag racing in particular, can be very fickle, and people are short-sighted about some things, and you have to be cognizant of what the ROI is that your group is bringing to the table, right? Because tech doesn't generate money for a promoter or a track. So what you want to do is you want to provide value. Correct. And what we try to do is we try to work within the parameters that were given by the different promoters, the different organizations and different tracks and track managers and things. And we try to assimilate into whatever their processes are. So again, it goes back to the people that I get a chance to work with in my immediate circle. All the people that I named earlier, they are very flexible. They assimilate well into whatever setting we're a part of. We never try to overstep our footprint, but if we do feel that there's something going on that needs to be addressed and taken care of, particularly in the name of safety or parity or class legality for the performance aspect of something, we're going to put our best foot forward and let these people know that, hey, these are some of the things that we see that may need to be addressed. You may not see them because you're not boots on the ground like we are, and it's well received more often than not.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, if you don't mind, can we talk about some of those things? Like, I not to agree or disagree with the statement, but I think we can dig into the statement a little bit of like the tech doesn't make money, because when I put my promoter hat on, I know that one of the things that as a promoter that I'm trying to do is best show most amount of cars with the best competition. So trying to get as many cars together that can somehow compete with each other and also put on the best show. And I know, like, back in the history of weeks with like Pink All Out and stuff like that, where it was like we'd have 300 cars and we'd have to try and figure out like, well, which section of cars
Right.
the best show out of. But
excuse me.
Can we dig into that a little bit of like what are some profit centers of tech and effective tech, and like what working with you guys effectively would look like?
So if you look at it from the larger aspect, right, like from the competition side of things, we have a lot of experience in creating rule sets that provide parity, and our knowledge base is quite extensive with different combinations and a diverse group of cars, and trying to get them into an ET bracket where the folks that are running at the front aren't so far in front that the guys at the back don't feel like they have an opportunity. Because once people feel that they don't have an opportunity, their enthusiasm is going to drop. And then what's going to happen is the bottom line, people stop showing up if they feel that they don't have an opportunity to compete and or win. So what a competition committee or a competition director needs to be cognizant of is making sure that you're casting a wide net and getting as many cars and as many people as you can into certain classes, and to make sure that the promoter and or track owners or track managers are getting the car counts they need to provide a good show for the public. Because we all know it only takes 2 cars to drag race, but it sure is nice when there's 32 to 50 cars vying for positions within a given field, whether it be 16 or 32. So the more cars that you can present to the public, and that's where I think the invitational stuff comes in, right? When you're inviting people and they have a name and you're bringing that stuff forward, people know what they're going to get at that point, right? But if it's an unknown entity, you have to start bringing in equity, right? You have to show that you're going to have X amount of cars. And I think that's where a lot of pressure comes from, both internal, you're trying to do the best job that you can do, but also external, like, listen, you need to bring me X amount of cars, otherwise payout's going to get cut, right? We see that all the time. Mm. So those are some of the things that we deal with and that we're aware of as a sideline to tech, as a competition committee and or rule makers, however you want to put that. Those are some of the things that we always bring into the equation.
Yeah. What are some ways that like effective and or ineffective tech and competition direction can lose promoters money?
So if the rule set is off for parity's sake, right, or it's not established and it's new, sometimes the promoters, track managers, they have to have some faith in the fact that this is going to be a viable class to work with. It's very hard getting in on the ground floor of some things and seeing beyond the immediate, right? And you only had, 12 cars at this particular event. Well, have some faith. Let's put some time and some effort and some energy into this thing, promote it properly, and maybe we can gain a couple at each event. So maybe over the year or so, well, that 12 has grown into 20. And then the following year, maybe 24 to 26, 28 cars, right? So now the promoter's starting to see, because each one of those racers brings a motorhome, a golf cart, 3 or 4 crew members, some family members. They may have friends that are in the local area that want to come watch them. And the more people that you have that are racing in a particular class, the more they bring and the more excitement they bring, and potentially more fans they bring through the gate. So there's a bit of an ROI there to the presentation of the class and showing that there's good competition and parity there. So again, there is some there. It's hard sometimes for people to not see that value in what we do.
Yeah. And then before we just get to the telling the whole John Sears story, I got to observe you at World Series of Pro Mod and the Pro Superstar Shootout, and just all the different things, like all the things that you bring. Tell us about some of those just intangible. I guess that's the word that I'm looking for. Just like some of the intangibles that you and your group bring to events.
So I guess at some point you would say that we're sort of nerds as far as knowledge goes when somebody says they're bringing a particular blower or they're bringing a particular engine combination, and one of the guys will immediately call it out. Oh yeah, that's a cannon valve, small block Ford, cast cylinder head, billet block, 88 millimeter turbo, and it's got to weigh this. Like after a while, the repetition people become very familiar with it. And again, I'm fortunate enough that the people that I'm around and that I get to work with really have good heads on their shoulders, and they're willing to learn and open themselves up to bringing in new things and get outside their comfort zone. Some people may have a pro mod background, or they may have a small tire background, or they may have a bracket or index background. Well, I'm able to bring all these guys together, and girls, and have them work together, and they all feed off one another and the information and everything else like that. So those are those intangibles, right? Somebody may have seen something at a race that some of us were not at, and they can bring that to our attention. And what that does is that makes us better as a group and as a whole.
Yeah.
So we provide that, right? So when Wes hires us as a group, or Donald hires us as a group, or Victor hires us as a group, we're able to make, the tech process as efficient as possible because of our knowledge base, and we're not standing there trying to figure out what's what. I'm not going to say we know everything, because nobody does, but the group is very savvy and understands what they're looking at and how to tech it properly.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and just get into your story from the start. Like, how did this begin? Like, did you think this was where you're gonna? I mean, I'm sure this isn't the end of the story, right? But like, did you think this was where you're gonna end up? Like, tell us about your life growing up. What was that like?
Well, so I've always been into cars. I've always been into some form of racing. I raced BMX as a kid. I raced motocross as a kid, and then as I got older, of course, cars were very much a part of my life as well, and I've always been sort of enamored with the whole street car scene, and any sort of street racing or anything like that was always one of those things that, was kind of taboo, right? Like the actual street racing. And when I went to my first drag race as a kid, I was like, wow, this is really something. And, ate up as much as I could through magazines and everything else like that, because this is the age before the internet, right? A race is going on somewhere, but you didn't know who won. You didn't know the ins and the outs and the numbers. And I was always looked at pro stock as one of those things where how close the racing was. And I always said to myself, one day I'm going to get an opportunity to either race in a class that I want to be a part of, but also, maybe affect some changes or maybe do some things in drag racing. So sort of in the back of my mind, I've always had sort of that desire and that passion for drag racing. And it sort of morphed itself by happenstance to get where I'm at right now. In the 80s, I don't know if very many people remember, but Buddy Ingersoll brought a Buick V6 to race in pro stock when that was still a thing. And they very much outlawed that particular combination. And now they're very cookie cutter at 2,350 pounds, 500 cubic inches, whatever. And it provides for amazing competition and everything else like that. But I always thought to myself, why couldn't they fit that particular combination in there and allow for some diversity within that class? So if you fast forward to 2008, 2009, 2010, when I was developing X275, that was one of the big things that I always wanted to do. And I always pressured myself to make sure that we had a lot of diversity in the class. We have imports, we have diesels, we have Pro Charge, we have turbocharged, we have big block nitrous, we have small block nitrous. It's a very diverse mix of cars that are very close within the ET in mile an hour that they run. And it's opened the doors for diesels to go into other classes like LDR and things like that. And I'm sure that at some point we'll see some imports racing maybe back in Ultra Street, or maybe even moving into LDR at a lighter weight and a bigger turbocharger. So again, those affecting those sort of changes, you're just casting a wider net by allowing these other combinations in. It's just a matter of getting them to fit properly, so they're either not running over the field or they're not so far behind the field that the guy gets dejected.
Yeah. So let's talk about the story of getting from were you involved with the Ingersoll Buick project or just as a fan?
No, not at all. I was just a fan, and actually test drove a Grand National off the showroom floor when I was in the Navy. I was active duty Navy at the time, very young.
Service.
Yeah, thank you. And I could afford the payment, but I couldn't afford the insurance at that time. So after qualifying for the loan and everything else like that, and getting in touch with the insurance company, there was not a chance that they were going to insure, somebody my age. I think I was 20. Gosh, I was probably 21, 22 at the time. In 86. So young and wanting to get a Grand National off the showroom. It just, if I would have known a little bit better, I probably could have wormed my way into a T-type, right? And that would have been a thing. But I had always kind of been enamored with those, even though I had V8 muscle cars and stuff as a teenager. I kind of like the whole Buick V6 thing. It just really kind of spoke to me. And I eventually purchased one and raced them at the Buick Nationals in Bowling Green and things like that. Actually had two at one time, and opened up a little shop, and then was working on them and doing some performance and stuff in the early 90s. So, the racing turbo cars before turbo cars were popular was quite a thing for me. So it's a lot of fun at the time.
Awesome. What business and leadership things that you learned in the Navy?
Well, so I was a petty officer second class, and I was a troubleshooter for the power plant section, which is the engine section of attack aircraft group. We worked on the A6 Intruder, and we were shooting them off the carrier deck of the Independence in the Forrestal. And I did that for 4 years. And when I got out of the active duty, I was able to get a position with the Texas Air National Guard, and as an engine guy again. And I worked on the F4 Phantom, the C&D models, and then we transitioned into the F-16. And that was probably 91, 92 time frame. And I left Texas and I went to Florida and got a full-time position with the National Park as an automotive mechanic. So I took that, and all that time, as you know, in the military, they're always sending you to leadership courses as you move up the ranks and everything. And I was a staff sergeant. So, of course, leadership is a big thing as a staff sergeant. You're leading younger troops and things of that nature there. So I was going to multiple leadership courses, NCO academies, and things of that nature there, which in turn allowed me to move up in the ranks. And I eventually retired from the Air Force Reserve. I was in a combat rescue unit doing HH-60 and C-130 stuff. As a master sergeant E7. So I have like 23 years in the military, both active duty and reserve and guard time, all told. I was the engine shop supervisor for the reserve section. So in my final stage of my career, I was the E7 master sergeant with a combat rescue unit, where we worked on HH-60 helicopters and C-130 aircraft that provided combat rescue to downed pilots or injured soldiers and airmen throughout the Middle East. And that was a really good time. I wound up being the shop supervisor for the reserve section and things of that nature there. So once again, as you get into the senior NCO ranks, more leadership things are placed upon your shoulder and more opportunities to go to school and to learn different things. All the while, I was still employed by the National Park Service, and I eventually moved into a maintenance supervision position and worked at two different national parks. I worked at Everglades National Park in Florida, and then I moved up to Spotsylvania, Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Battlefield in Virginia, and that's a Civil War battlefield. So I was general maintenance supervisor there as well. So
yeah. Well, and
diverse background.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind telling us about some of the leadership things that you learned, and one of the things that, I love the different ways that people go about building their business, right? And when I hear you talk about RTRA, like you talk about it's not just you, like it's a whole team of people. And I think about how most tech people I know would build a business, and it would probably just be like, yeah, I'm just going to go around and do everything myself. But you,
yeah, that's very much like the mindset, right? Initially, because you don't know, you don't know how other people are going to work with you, right? So you don't want to be overbearing, you don't want to be controlling, but you also want to make sure that stuff is being checked properly and that you're going to check it consistently, right? You want to provide a consistent service. And we've worked together as a group for so long that somebody within our group can go somewhere and the promoter, track manager, or organization is going to feel that they're going to get the same level of service out of myself or any one of the folks that I have an opportunity to work with. And that's just from the leadership schools and things of that nature there. You're only as good as your people. Like you can be a stellar guy and you really know your stuff. But you have to value your people and you have to value their input and you have to value their ability. And the people that I get the opportunity to work with have wonderful ability, wonderful attitude, great teamwork and team skills. If somebody sees somebody's needing help working on a car, trying to get it through tech, or they finished their car, they're going to jump right onto the next one and assist whoever's teching that car in order to expedite and make things efficient. And that goes without asking. It's just a natural thing with this group of people that I get to do this with. And I'm very humbled by their work ethic and their abilities and their knowledge, because I always feel that I still can learn something moving forward, and that they bring things to the table, and those intangible things you talked about, right? They have maybe a level of OCD that I may not have, right? So they're very efficient in certain areas with either Word documents or Excel spreadsheets and things like that, because we use all those things to track and gain knowledge of where certain combinations are so we can make rule changes to affect parity.
Gotcha. So tell us about, like, where did you, or, was it a clean shift from like military national park stuff into racing, or did some of the stuff overlap? Like, how did that work?
So it overlapped quite a bit. The reserve and federal government work with the National Park Service. Those two overlapped with one another, but I was still trying to race my own car. And when I got off of active duty after being in the desert for a couple of years, there was some stuff local to us that needed some help and some push. And so I got involved with some of that stuff at Immokalee Regional Raceway with their Fast Friday shootouts and their stock suspension stuff. And then drag racing became really big. And I had always loved the small tire stuff and worked with some people, and we brought radial racing to Orlando Speed World as part of the World Street Nationals and things of that nature there. And there's a lot of people involved with that. I had a very small part of it. But I was probably more vocal than some, and really tried to round up and rally the troops to get behind this thing. And that's kind of how all this started, right? Like, somebody needed to be vocal and somebody needed to help push. And there were so many good people that we got a chance to work with early on. Dwayne Guthridge, Troy Perez Sr., Chris Little, all those guys were very early on in the drag radial world. And knowing those guys and seeing what they were capable of doing on that small tire and a street tire in particular, just sort of, got my fire burning, and I was able to go out and work with those guys and help affect, getting the drag radial class in Orlando. Again, I'm not taking any credit for that or anything like that. I just know that I was a small part of it, which was really cool, and I'm honored to have been there sort of on the ground floor. And as those things grow, right, things get faster, right? So there's an opportunity to bring in some classes behind that. And we did that through a 650 index class that was strictly on a radial tire. And the first big event that we were able to do in a Immokalee Regional Raceway called the Tomato Nationals, we had 34 cars in the 650 index class. the beauty of that class is there's no chassis certification needed. There's no license needed. All those things that made it very affordable and a lot of fun for a lot of people. And those classes then in turn grew into Florida Real Street, Ultra Street, X275, all that stuff. It all just kind of morphed and grew over the years.
Yeah. And originally were most of the participants local to the track, or were you guys getting people from all around, and how did you spread the word?
There was large groups of people in the state of Florida that really liked the small tire stuff. Donald Long and a bunch of folks up at Sunshine Dragway, those guys had their own stock suspension shootouts, and there was sort of a rivalry between the group in Immokalee and the group in Sunshine, and Donald was sort of just starting to put his promoter hat on and working with some people. They had a big $5,000 win race up at Sunshine Dragway, and then the Tomato Nationals they helped put in there, which bolstered the payout there. So again, we were able to kind of create some rivalries in the state of Florida, which helped grow. And I was kind of there when all that stuff was going on, which is really cool.
Yeah. Can what's sort of your opinion and/or advice on in things like that where there are rivalries? Like sometimes rivalries make everyone better, sometimes rivalries kill both people or kills one of the two. Like what have you noticed in racing? Like what's your wish for racing, or what's your advice when it comes to things like that?
I think the biggest piece of advice I could give to anybody that's wanting to race in a heads up category is understand and know your limits, whether they be financially, mechanically, your ability to tune the car, your ability to drive the car. You have to know what those limits are. It is a tough group. I don't care if you're in pro mod, or if you're in top sportsman, or if you're index racing, or you're bracket racing, or your heads up radio racing. The people that have been doing it for a while are very good at what they do. And to come in with the idea that you're going to go right to the top, take a deep breath, understand that these guys have a ton of time and a ton of equity and a ton of laps in their cars. But don't get discouraged, because if you put the right group of people together, you too can go to the top. Or if you come in with the idea of running, let's say, Pro 275, look at what your budget's going to be. You may be able to afford the car. Are you going to be able to afford the maintenance? And if that's one of those things that you're going to stumble with, know that the people that you're racing against are freshening their motors up after every event. Or sometimes they're putting in their spare motor at the event. So have some realistic goals, but don't ever shy away from a challenge.
Yeah. And how about for tracks and sanctioning bodies and promoters too? Because a lot of people, like I said, rivalries, like a track has something going on, another track has something going on, and instead of working together, I'm not saying that the answer is always working together, but sometimes the rivalry kills both because it just splits the crowd up, and there's not enough. Just using that as a prompt. Like, what's your advice for people in those situations?
Well, we know that you can only slice a pie so many ways. And the more you slice that pie, the smaller the pieces get for everybody. So what you want to do is you want to use communication, right? You want to communicate to your competition in the neighborhood and go, hey, I understand that you've got this coming up, and in good faith go, you know what, I'm not going to schedule on top of you. But what I am going to do is I'm going to schedule 2 weeks later something very similar to that, and hopefully work together in that. Otherwise, you guys are cutting your own throats and nobody's going to win at that point. But if we work together, I think Wes always says it, high tide raises all boats. And that's such a great analogy with that. If we all work together, we all pull in the same direction, we all want the same thing, right? Which is a successful motorsports industry, particularly drag racing for the group that we're dealing with. And if you can work together and you can put your best foot forward, provide consistency, provide communication, I think what that's going to do is that's really going to give people the opportunity to all be successful and all be able to make money and all keep a roof over their head and put food on the table.
Yeah, yeah. So where did it go after those first early days at the tracks that you were mentioning?
So as we were doing all this, radio racing became really, really big. And there was a bit of falling out at the Orlando event in World Street Nationals. And Donald started his own series, and I had moved to Virginia. And I was working closely with some really good people up in Virginia Motorsports Park, and at Budds Creek and Maryland International Raceway. The Miller family has just been just super amazing to work with. Chris Miller, rest in peace. Yeah. We're going to miss you. You're just such a wonderful human being, and we love you. And the Miller family, our prayers and hugs go out to you guys for your loss. So I just wanted to bring that up because Chris was such an integral part of the Budds Creek family. And also I have the opportunity to work World Cup with both Jason and Chris, and they are just head and shoulders above quite a few people in this industry with their level of energy and passion, and also just their unique way of making things happen and being so prepared and so organized. So just want to go out there and say with them, because they're very good friends and offered opportunities to me that maybe some people wouldn't have. And I've always been thankful and grateful that I've had that opportunity with them, humbled by it actually. So yeah,
definitely a great family and a terrible loss for them and for the whole industry for sure.
Absolutely. So we moved to Bradenton and then South Georgia for all these radio events and stuff like that. And as the rules morphed and became more comprehensive, and we grew X275 into what it is, and Ultra Street and Ultimate Street, and now we do the limited 235 stuff, Pro 275, LDR, RBW, all these classes kind of became their own machine, so to speak. And there was lots of independent radio races growing up, and people were holding all these different events and putting out great payouts and everything else like that. So this whole radio movement, Donald stuff and the whole Lights Out and No Mercy and Thrones and all that stuff there was a catalyst for this whole side of the industry to really blow up. And I was just fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, however you want to look at it, to be part of all that, and fell into the tech role by default because I was writing some rules for the Florida Real Street stuff, and there was nobody available to tech it. So I raised my hand, and the rest is history. Now I'm a certified silver NHRA tech, and have my own business doing this after I retired from the National Park Service 3 years ago, almost to the day. So I've been doing this as a full-time job for 3 years, and been very blessed and very fortunate with openings in the schedule and people contacting us or me contacting them to get either myself or my group or a combination of both at their venues and at their events to provide service.
Yeah. What's your advice of people about just putting themselves in right situations and then also raising their hands when the moment comes?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because the worst that somebody can tell you is no. And if it comes with an explanation as to why, and then your next question should be, okay, what can I do to be a part of things? Is there something that I need to do? Is there certification I need to do? How do I build equity and get my resume bolstered up to where I can qualify to become one of the team members doing something at a racetrack? And those are the hard things, right? Because a lot of that comes with long hours, low pay, and sometimes no pay, right? Sometimes you're doing it as a volunteer to put your foot in the door to show people what you're capable of. And I've sacrificed a lot of time and energy and my own money trying to make this thing work over the years. And I think part of that sacrifice is now coming back, and people are looking at, what I've brought to the table, and they're like, yeah, that guy's really been out there doing his thing, and he's got some great people that he's working with. Let's give them an opportunity, and see what they're capable of, and if they're a good fit, we'll just keep using them year after year. And I'm very apprehensive to tell people no, that I don't have anybody available for a weekend to go work their event. I'll always try to find somebody, because what happens is you tell somebody no, well, then the following year when they're doing an event again, you're not the guy they're going to call. They're going to find somebody else to do it. So if they can call myself or one of my staff or what have you, that means we're still relevant, and that means we're still part of the game.
Yeah. So talk about growing your business. Like, who was the first, and how did it grow? And just tell us about growing your business.
So I grew the business as a rule maker, but then in turn, I also had my own championship series within it, and developed a lot of good relationships with sponsors and things of that nature there. And even as of 22, RTRA put $63,000 in the hands of racers throughout the year, through year-end championship series stuff or race-to-race payouts and things of that nature there. My company is a pass-through for that kind of thing. So anything that I receive from a sponsor, we make sure that it gets direct to the racer. There's no additional fees or costs or add-ons or anything like that. If I get XYZ from a certain sponsor, I'm going to make sure that the racers get XYZ. And that, to me, there's administrative fees and administrative costs and everything else like that. And I absorb a lot of that stuff and do a lot of that stuff on my own. I don't ask any of my folks to do any of that, because that's part of the business that they're not part of, right? And I don't think it would be fair to ask them to do anything in regards to that, even though if I asked, I'm sure they would definitely step up. But with the advent of the Radio Outlaws Racing Series, there was really no reason for me to continue doing championship series for X275 and Ultra Street, because those radio races, those independent radio races outside the Radio Outlaws Racing Series, kind of dried up, and it didn't really make sense to ask sponsors to be redundant in their sponsorships for different things. So I just kind of took a back seat on that one there. Still part of the Radio Outlaws Racing Series as their tech guy. And of course, my business and my folks also get a chance to work there. But we still do a championship series with our limited street guys, our little tire guys. Eventually, we may be able to get them on a bigger stage at some point. But right now, that class is growing by leaps and bounds. At Lights Out 15, we had like 34 cars, no double entries. They were all entries into that class, which is really good to see it grow. We've got some amazing sponsors that are part of that, that have been with us a number of years, and hopefully, we'll keep them happy and keep doing what we need to do, and keep them on board.
That's awesome. What do you see next in the future, both for small tire radio racing, but also for your business?
So the growth of the business, we've actually brought on some extra people this year to cover some of these additional events that we've been contracted for. Like I said, we picked up a contract in early April for 22 additional events. So there's a lot of moving parts and logistics, and making sure that people are going to be where they're supposed to be when our people need them there. My big thing is we provide a consistent service and a friendly face when you go to these tracks, because as many racers know, you go to some tracks and some of the tech guys may not be the friendliest people on earth. And you have to understand that we get so much pushback from racers. After a while, you could get a little jaded about things, or you may not deal with people the way you're supposed to, right? Like sometimes people come to tech and you're like, man, it's the third time I've told this guy about XYZ that he needs to fix on his car and he still hasn't fixed it. Well, at some point you just got to tell him, no, you got to load it up and you got to go home. That's the hard fact of it, right? You don't want to do that. That affects the bottom line for the promoter. But at the same time, we're here to, first and foremost, to prevent somebody from being harmed, because safety is our number one job with what we do, right? We want to make sure that everybody's safe and they have the items that they need that correspond to the ET that they run. And that's always been one of the big things for me, is safety. And when you get that pushback from a racer about seatbelts or something, one or two times, you tell him, look, don't come to the next race without your seatbelts. Well, he'll bring his seatbelts and he'll have them in the car. See, I got seatbelts for you. No, sir, you didn't get seatbelts for me. You got seatbelts for you. I'm not driving the car. Right. And your family, you can go home now in one piece should, there be some sort of mishap. And at the end of the day, that's all I want. I want these guys to go fast, have fun, and be safe.
Yeah. So someone who watches the show and gets inspired by your story and says, that's the path I want to take, what do you have to say to them?
My email is john@x275.net. Hit me up. I've had a couple of people hit me up, and I've kind of given them the down and dirty on some of the things that may be required of them, the excessive hours, the lack of sleep. You might be eating out of a cooler for 3 days, some sandwiches and whatnot. We're not out here eating gourmet meals, and it gets hot and it's dirty and you're on the ground and looking under cars, and, you might have a racer that's not having a good day, and, you're going to have to handle that. So if you're willing to do something like that, I just said my email address, hit me up, let me know. And you may have to work for free for a little while, or at a small amount, and see if you can get your foot in the door and see how you feel about doing this stuff.
Yeah. And what's I know that we we're coming up to the top of the hour here. Just what's just a personal or business ask that you have from the people listening here today? How can we help and support you?
Well, I would say that if there's an event coming up or there's a particular organization that's working and needs some help with the event, again, my email is john@x275.net, and I am pretty good about responding to emails and requests and things of that nature. And if there's an opportunity for us to come and work with you, eventually we would like to move into also supporting tech staff on a local level, and maybe sending one of our people to help them get trained up on some of the nuances that they may not be aware of or cognizant of, and maybe make their local tech people a little bit better, and provide some opportunity for training and things of that nature.
That's awesome. Well, John, from the first day I met you, I was a fan, and then second and third day after I saw some of the stuff you did, I grew to appreciate you even more, and from this conversation, even more so. So thank you so much for doing what you do. Thank you. I mean, the industry definitely needs it. Hopefully this conversation taught some people a lot of stuff and inspired some folks too.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me today.
Thank you too. And want to thank you guys also for being here this weekend for another episode of Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business. We're here every Monday night, 6 p.m. Central Time. So we'll see you next week here on Drag Illustrated. Take care.